Hi, I'm Chris McBrien, a Gen Xer, and the pop culture from my generation is awesome.
And I'm Yancey Eaton, a millennial, and the pop culture from my generation is dope.
Episode 11, Bombs Away. Hey, it's Pop Goes Your World. I'm Chris McBrien, and that is Yancey Eaton. This week is going to be a good show. We're going to be talking about the biggest box office flops of all time, but it's a little bit of a different spin on them because we talked, I think it was back on episode 6, we talked about cult movies, and the thing with that was a lot of them were, box office bombs, but then they kind of went on to new life, from DVD and video and stuff like that, and we love them. This week's a little different. We're going to talk about movies that bombed and stayed dead. Basically, everyone hates them except us. For whatever reason, we love some bombs. So, Yancey, what's going on this week, brother?
Well, I'm doing the retail management thing, so it makes for really inconsistent schedules and stuff. Yesterday was my first day off in, 8 or 9 days, something like that.
Oh, nice. And, what did you do? Do anything fun and exciting?
I did do something fun, and I actually could not wait to tell you this. I intentionally didn't text this to you or anything like that. I wanted to get this out on the show, but I started watching a new show on Netflix.
What was it? What is it?
I will give you a hint. It started in 1982.
1982. Is it Cheers?
It was Cheers.
Oh, you can't get anything past me.
Yeah, very nice. I don't know why I started watching it, but I was literally just scrolling through, and I've watched The Office from start to finish, the American version, 4 or 5 times. I love The Office. I always will, but that's always my crutch. I want to be entertained, and I want to watch something that I know that I'm going to enjoy, and it's familiar, so I always go back to the same things. So I've been trying to really challenge myself to watch other things that I know are relevant, and that maybe a different time frame kind of thing. Obviously, it was the show started 6 years before I was born, so I started watching it, and it is very, very charming. It is very funny. I love the dynamic between Shelley and Ted. It's just Sam and Diane. I'm kind of scared because I've done a little bit of reading about it, and just to see all the characters that they bring on and some of the characters that go away, it's I'm almost afraid because I've only watched a handful of episodes, but it's so good right now that I'm already fearing the inevitable change when it comes.
I know, because that's the thing, you've been tipped off because there's big changes in the cast coming. But here's the thing, that show is unbelievable, and I think I mean you could speak to this better than me. I think it kind of stands up when you think. I haven't seen it for years, but I think it really does stand the test of time. Maybe it looks a little bit dated, but it takes place in a bar, right? But here's some interesting trivia on Cheers. I love trivia. So the role that of Sam Malone was originally supposed to be given to William Devane. So he's an actor. You probably never heard of him. He went on to be on things like, I think, Falcon Crest, stuff like that. But anyway, so obviously Ted Danson got the role. It just was so great. So the first year that it came out in 1982, it debuts, and then they have the ratings. You know what I mean? And then, after a couple of weeks or a couple of months into the season, the ratings come out. Guess where Cheers was on all the lists of all the network shows? They list them. Cheers was dead last. The absolute worst rated show of the year. And so NBC, of course, canceled it. And they canceled the show mid-season, and they got so many letters. Remember, this is before email. They got so many letters from fans that said, hey, we love that movie. What do you do? Or we love that TV show. What are you doing? They brought it back. And it went on to become one of the most, beloved TV shows of all time. And Cliff Clavin, you saw Cliff Clavin on it. Remember, he was the rebel guy on Hawk that we mentioned in the Star Wars episode last week. So in Empire Strikes Back.
Yep.
So you're going to really love it. It really, don't fear the changes of the show. I know it's hard because the chemistry between Sam and Diane is so incredible.
It really is this palpable, just, I don't want to use the word adorable because it kind of gives it this juvenile meaning, but the dynamic between the two of them, the chemistry that they have, I can't think of a better word than adorable. Just seeing them back and forth, you almost think that you can tell that they really like each other outside of the show. It's just, I don't know. I don't know if they actually did or not. That's interesting because a lot of times on-screen chemistry does not translate off-screen. There's a lot of really, really good examples of that in movies and television where, a couple has just unbelievable chemistry on screen, but they absolutely hate the hell out of each other off-screen. You see it a lot. One that comes to mind is a movie called An Officer and a Gentleman. It came out right around that same time, around 82, and Deborah Winger and Richard Gere were in it. They had unbelievable chemistry on screen, and they
hated being in the same room together shooting the scenes. So sometimes you never know, but it's all interesting. So anyway, you ready to get into some really big box office bombs this week?
I am more than ready. Let's do this.
All right, let's go. And everyone knows how much I love Fonzie.
I don't know if you've seen any of the Sharknado movies.
Shatner and Takei are going to be there.
I cannot believe that this is actually possible.
The Star Wars prequels were awful.
Young Doctors in Love.
Young Doctors in Love. Bad CGI kind of starts and ends with George Lucas.
Some of the worst CGI I have ever seen in my entire life.
He ruined the whole original trilogy by superimposing Hayden Christensen over Sebastian Shaw at the end of Jedi. Okay, Yancey, I'm going to let you take us away. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, just to kind of preface things, sometimes movies bomb at the box office, right? But then they kind of go on and have sort of new life in the years that follow. Like The Shawshank Redemption, This Is Spinal Tap, movies like that. They go on to have like huge cult followings and they become, big movies over time. And then other movies bomb and then they just totally stay dead, right? And those are the ones that I'm interested in talking about this week. So let's talk about some box office bombs that you actually like, even though no one else does. So Yancey, let's do another top 5 list this week. You start us off, your number 5 bomb of all time that you love.
Okay, so my number 5, my parents watched this with me and they hated it, like a lot of movies that I've already mentioned on the show.
Right.
I want to see if you can guess it. I'm going to give you just a little synopsis of it and see if you can guess this film. It is in 1999 when it was released, which we've already talked about. It's a great movie, or year for movies. It is an American superhero comedy film. It was directed by Kinka Usher and written by Neil Cuthbert and Bob Burden. And let me name some of the characters that are in this movie. Hank Azaria, Claire Filani, Ben Stiller, William H. Macy, Tom Waits. There's a lot of, really well-known actors in this. The movie made $33 million and it had a budget of $68 million. Do you have any idea what this movie is called?
I don't actually. You've got me on that one.
Yeah, this was a really weird movie. It obviously bombed. It didn't do good on DVD sales. The movie is actually called Mystery Men.
Oh, yes, I remember that one now. Wasn't Paul Rubens in it too, now that I'm thinking about it?
I actually can't remember that, but I mean, like, Greg Kinnear was in it. Yeah, Paul Rubens was in it. You're right.
Yeah, Pee Wee Herman. He had a small role. Yeah, it was like a comeback thing for him.
And, Eddie Izzard is in it. I mean, there's just... It's a really, really weird movie. Obviously, it's based on, I don't want to say obviously because hardly anybody remembers the movie, but it's based on like anti-heroes where like, there's this city and, this fictitious city and, the main hero goes missing. So they assemble all of these like would-be, heroes that aren't really heroes at all kind of thing. It's a superhero team basically, and it's with Mr. Furious as Ben Stiller and the Shoveler, by William H. Macy, and then Blue Raja as Hank Azaria, and they all have like not real powers, like they like sew, and like one is like she it's just like a regular woman whose superpowers only work 4 days a month because it only works when she's on her menstrual cycle. It's like a really weird, really, really weird movie that like I said, my parents absolutely hated. Only did $33.5 million in the box office, and it cost $68 million to make. It's so weird. I mean, a couple other names that were in it: Artie Lang, Dane Cook's in it, Michael Bay. The entire Goody Mob, the musical group Goody Mob, including CeeLo Green, is in it. I mean,
in his little tiny arms.
Yeah. It's just it's just a really, really odd movie. I'm rambling right now, but if you guys can find it somewhere, find it on DVD. I don't think it's on Netflix, but go back and enjoy this amazing bad movie that is still bad, and it's Mystery.
Oh, I like it. Okay, my number 5. By the way, I love this week's topic. This is awesome. Yes. Okay, so my number 5 from 1984. Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo. So back in like the early 80s, breakdancing was like a big thing, right? And Yancey, you're obviously familiar with breakdancing, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm pretty sure that it goes all the way back to like James Brown with like the Good Foot, and then there was a B-boy, and then it kind of morphed into like these dance battles in Harlem, and then kind of eventually, breakdancing kind of came into the mainstream, like sort of anyway. But some people, I guess, felt that breakdancing was popular enough to make a movie about, so they came out with this movie called Breakin' in 1984, and it was about this like jazz dance teacher, and she meets these like street dancers, and they're named like Shabadoo and Boogaloo Shrimp, and I'm not making this stuff up, by the way. And then they came out with a sequel Now get ready for this.
It had a sequel.
Yeah, a sequel in the same year. So you know they didn't exactly put a lot of effort into making the sequel.
It was a cash grab. It was like, let's hurry up and
Yeah, and let me tell you, watching it, you can tell they didn't put a lot of effort into it. It's like lowest common denominator filmmaking, if there ever was. But the movie has become known in pop culture as kind of a tentpole in terms of like just completely unnecessarily and largely unwanted, sequels. I remember my buddies in college and we used to always joke around about bad movie sequels by adding Electric Boogaloo to the movie title. Like, for example, we'd say like Teen Wolf 2, Electric Boogaloo. Or like Grease 2, Electric Boogaloo. And funny enough, actually, Mike Myers, when he was making the sequel to Austin Powers, on the short list for titles was Austin Powers 2, Electric Boogaloo. And the other funny thing about the movie is that Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo, is actually better than Breakin', the first movie. But in a lot of ways, I guess it's kind of like sort of looking at two piles of and saying, well, that one doesn't smell quite as bad as that one. You know what I mean? Oh, I tell you, no matter what, though, this movie, Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo, it's become like this total inside joke for Gen Xers when it comes to sequels. So I had to include it on my list.
Breakin' Boogaloo.
Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Oh my gosh. All right. Okay.
So that's mine. Number 4. What do you got?
Okay. So number 4 for me also is a 1999 film. This one's directed by Barry Sonnenfeld and was written by S.S. Wilson, Brent Maddock, Jeffrey Price, and Peter S. Seaman. I am not a film writer. I don't write scripts or screenplays or anything like that. But just from the little bits that I've read doing the research for the show, most times if you have an entire team of people writing one script, that does not portend to end well. Like you have a lot of conflicting, themes and like just really, incoherent dialogue and stuff. And this film has lots of it. Again, I'm going to let you guess it. It is a steampunk inspired Western film that came out in 1999. Do you know what it is?
A punk inspired Western film?
Steampunk.
Oh, steampunk?
Yes.
Help. What is steampunk exactly?
Chris.
Yeah, no, help me. I'm old. I'm a millennial.
Steampunk is it's like a whole genre of things. I mean, it can be the way you dress or like an industrial design. It's like if you ever go into like a bar and like it's all metallic and it's very, very chic. You see like a lot of like cast iron and stuff. Like it's actual like women who do cosplay whenever they do steampunk. Like it's literally they have all kinds of like metallic gadgets and it's really, really industrial looking. That's like the whole design of it.
Is it with Will Smith? Is it Wild Wild West?
It is.
Oh god, yeah.
West.
Oh good.
Okay.
Oh okay, good. I got a question for you in the trivia segment tonight on that movie. So that's awesome. Cool.
Oh, I didn't. Excellent.
Yeah,
okay.
I didn't really know what steampunk was, but there you go. So I learned a new thing.
Yeah, obviously is a Western. It stars Will Smith and Kevin Kline. Kevin Kline actually plays multiple parts. He's one of the heroes, and he's also one of the antagonists, two separate characters. And of course, it has the lovely Salma Hayek in it as well. This movie is weird. It is bad. The total cost of production was over $170 million, and it did return $220 million. But if you look at the reviews of it, obviously the movie was just universally tanked. Everybody said that it sucked, including almost every single person that's seen it. It does not have any type of staying quality whatsoever. Anybody who ever admits to watching it once will admittedly say that they've never watched it again. I, on the other hand, love it just because, I think the reason why I gravitate, to movies in between like 99 to like 2002 is just because of the age where I was. I was 11, 12 years old. Everything that came out around that time was good to me. You know what I mean? I was a child. Like I couldn't discern between what was a fantastic film and what was a horrible film. We had this on VHS and my siblings and I, we just wore it out. To make things even better about Wild Wild West is, of course, the accompanying rap song that was its title theme, starring Will Smith. That's very, very bad. I'll give you one scene just to like paint a picture for those of you who haven't seen it. Will Smith, he's in the lair, with the bad guy, whatever the bad guy of the film, and there's all these people around, and Will Smith is dressed up as like a belly dancer, and he has like a veil over his face and stuff, and he's doing like these like violent, like erotic, like convulsions and like seducing this guy, and he leans in and he's slipping a key to his partner, who is handcuffed, and he basically says like, this brassiere is killing me and this garter belt is riding up my ass. It's just like it's It's so awkward and so bad. I mean, literally from start to finish, the entire movie is just painfully awkward, and like you can't help but asking yourself over and over again, like, why does this movie exist? Like, why did they make this movie? You know what I mean? Like, it's not it doesn't jive at all. I mean, it has everything you look for, though, in steampunk-centric westerns, if that makes any kind of sense. I mean, it has, like, an 80-foot mechanical tarantula. The main villain is legless, and, like, he's on, like, a mechanical, like, a wheelchair type thing. Like I said, completely incoherent dialogue. It's just such a weird movie that my siblings and I loved, you know, when we were kids. And somehow it still holds up for me. I watched it a couple years ago, and I loved it. So Will Smith's Wild Wild West is number 4.
Very nice. Okay, my number 4 is Flash Gordon from 1980. And back in the 30s and 40s, Flash Gordon, the comic strips, they were really, really popular, right? And then they even turned them into movie serials back then. And they went on to inspire like several future Hollywood directors, not least of which was George Lucas. And like he loved those old serials. So did Spielberg. And they were actually inspirations for Star Wars and Raiders. But King Features wanted like all this money, you know, for the rights to the name of Flash Gordon. And so Dino De Laurentiis ended up optioning the rights, and Lucas tried to get the rights from him, but he just wanted too much money. So Lucas decided, oh, forget it, I'll just write Star Wars instead. So that worked out pretty well. But, you know, by the time they got around to making the Flash Gordon movie, Star Wars had already taken over the pop culture landscape, and it had set a new standard for science fiction and filmmaking in general, really, right? So it was, I think, really clear to everybody involved that Flash Gordon was going to be really difficult to sell to audiences in 1980. So the producers decided, let's take the approach of making it deliberately campy. You know, they used all these over-the-top costumes, and the sets were lit with, like, weird colors. They did it by, like, shining lights through these sort of tanks of water on set. But the problem was, when they came around to shoot the scenes, there was a lot of disagreements about playing it campy, so they had the actors play it straight. And it just didn't work. You know, you got these actors trying to play it straight against all these over-the-top sets and costumes. The whole thing's a mess. And they were going to get Kurt Russell to play the lead, and he turned it down, so they ended up going with Sam Jones, who had been discovered, I guess if you could call it that, he was on an episode of The Dating Game. And then he was also a Playgirl centerfold model. And so they hired him to be the lead role to play Flash Gordon. He ends up like arguing with Dino De Laurentiis, about coming back in. De Laurentiis wanted him to come back in and do loops, okay, on his dialogue, and he wouldn't do it. He wanted more money and all this. So De Laurentiis said, fine, no problem. And he just dubbed the whole dialogue. So if you watch the movie, all of Sam Jones' lines in the movie are overdubbed by another actor. So
are you kidding me?
Yeah, needless to say, the movie, it didn't do very well. But no, you know what? Regardless, as a 10-year-old at the time, I loved the movie. I have a lot of fond memories of it as a kid. I've rewatched it as an adult. I still like it. The song by Queen is great. I let my kid actually listen to the song, and now he wants to watch the movie, so I'll let you know how that goes. But,
what's the song?
It's called Flash.
And it's by Queen.
By Queen. Give it a listen. You could actually find it on YouTube, and you'll see they kind of have the opening of the movie with the song. The song. Well, I mean, anything Queen did was great. I mean, Freddie Mercury was the best, right? So it was really, really good, but it was just really campy. I liked it, so it's my number 4, Flash Gordon.
All right, I'm making a little note right here to look that up on YouTube as soon as we get off.
So what's your number 3?
All right, so my number 3 also came out in 1999, which I don't know why I keep doing that. I don't do it on purpose, but here we are. This movie, it stars Willem Dafoe and Norman Reedus of Walking Dead fame. It's essentially a movie about 2 Irish brothers that take matters into their own hands by becoming vigilantes. The movie, of course, is Boondock Saints. And this is one of those movies where it does have a little bit of a cult following, but not nearly to the caliber of some of the other films that we've talked about in the past. Its timing was incredibly unfortunate, as I can't remember if it was exactly if it lined up perfectly, but of course that year when it was scheduled to be released, it was the Columbine shootings, and there was this huge national discussion about guns and whether the movie should have even been made. Like I said, I can't remember exactly how it lined up with the production versus the release and how that coincided with the actual school shooting. But it basically only had a 5-theater run, and it only earned $30,000 in 5 theaters. Yeah. Eventually, just through word of mouth, it started picking up DVD sales and stuff like that, and eventually grossed about $50 million. But that was still much less than it took to make it. Most of the, like I said, most of the success came directly from word of mouth. despite the fact that it was completely trashed by basically every single critic who watched it. And one of the recurring things that I've seen in multiple reviews that I read for this was everybody said that the directors and the writers were trying to do like a really bad impression of like a Quentin Tarantino movie, where like you could tell like Tarantino was their idol, but the execution was just so poor. But despite that, I mean, being like a 16-year-old kid, whenever you see this movie for the first time, it was years after this movie had been released that I had seen it. My mom wouldn't let me watch that as an 11-year-old. But I remember watching with some friends of mine at a Halo 2 party that we were having. Obviously, Halo 2 is a video game, Chris.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
we talked about this.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. And
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, we're good. And it's just one of those like, it's kind of dark to admit this, but like there's a part of like every teenage boy that kind of like wishes he was like this badass who like, takes down criminals and like stands up for like the little man. And, it's just all around just he doesn't answer to anyone and he kind of makes his own rules. And that movie always like applied to me. It's still, like I said, a very kind of fly under the radar film, but it holds up. And I think it's like a really dark, just well done film. And, it's one of those films, anytime it's on TV, I will watch it. I will watch it.
Nice.
So Boondock Saints, number 3 for me.
All right, that's a good one. Okay, my number 3. The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh from 1978.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, baby, let me tell you, this one's a doozy. So, Yancey, I got to ask you, what do you think you get when you combine disco, basketball, and astrology? One of the worst movies of all time, apparently. It's the movie's about this basketball team, and they're called the Pittsburgh Pythons, and it's got all these like real life basketball players, from the time in it. Like there's like Meadowlark Lemon and Dr. J, they're on the team, and guys like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Connie the Hawk Hawkins, they got cameos. This team is awful, right? And they lose every single game. So one guy, I remember at the beginning of the movie, he's in the middle of a game, and he pulls up his jersey, and it's written, "Trade me," is written in big white letters on his stomach.
His jersey?
Yeah, no, on his stomach. It's written on his stomach. He's a black guy. He's got the big white letters, "Trade me." And so they try to turn the team around. So the team goes and hires an astrologist, played by none other than Stockard Channing, Rizzo from Grease. And she determines that the astrological sign for the team is Pisces. And she uses astrology to try and help them start winning. So the Pisces, the fish, thus, that saved Pittsburgh, right? So I remember when I was in university, my roommate John Gott and I, we used to watch this movie on VHS. We'd always make inside jokes about it. I remember I had this book that listed like movie reviews of like every movie ever made. And I remember the review for the movie was something like it said like it's a story about a Wobegon basketball team that uses astrology to win, and the film is Wobegon 2. And it was a huge bomb, no wonder, but I loved it.
Did you see it in theaters?
No, I didn't see it in theaters at the time, but I saw it like on VHS, and I just loved it. And let me tell you, it's the fish that saved Pittsburgh. Whoa, 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 whoa! it was awesome. Okay, so number 2, what do you got?
Okay, this film it's not like a funny film at all. My next one is, but this one is a little bit more of a serious movie. Again, there's like a occurring theme here where the movie was basically tanked by critics and it did not do well in theaters at all. It's probably the weirdest movie, in my opinion, that Robin Williams ever made or was ever a part of. I haven't seen all of his catalog, but I mean, this is easily just the absolute weirdest for me. It's Bicentennial Man. Have you seen it?
Oh, no, I've heard about it. I heard it. It looks weird.
Okay, yeah, it is very weird. And it's a long movie. It's very weird. My parents pieced out like halfway through it. I basically stayed up late watching it by myself. It's a film adaptation of the Isaac Asimov novel of the same name. Obviously, Chris, Isaac Asimov is like one of the original gangsters of science fiction. I mean, he's written a ton of books, and everybody who, knows anything about science fiction owes this guy, he's the Shakespeare of science fiction, basically. He's like the godfather.
Right.
So it's basically about a robot. This family, it's in the near future. This family gets this robot. It's an android that basically helps out around the house and does menial tasks and stuff like that. And he's basically kind of like a nanny. But over time, he basically develops like a really close relationship to the family, or at least some of them. Some of them are curious about him. Some of them are accepting. Some of the family actually grows to hate and resent him, and they actually try to do harm to him. But like I said, he develops a real personality and like this really visceral sense of identity. Eventually, he becomes so, just like entrenched like in his own personal beliefs that he actually asks for his freedom and is eventually given it by his owners. So he basically lives, as, I want to say a human, but he lives on his own as like his own entity. Over the course of the next century, he uses all of his skills that he has to create prosthetics for himself to try to make himself look as humanly possible. I mean, he literally has like artificial skin. He builds himself like a nervous system so he can feel things like, heat and, pain and stuff like that. He figures out a way to like attach hair to himself. It gets so far to where like it really toys with like that idea of what is human and what is a machine. Basically, at one point he basically like petitions the World Congress of that time, based in this movie, to recognize him as like a real human being, which of course they don't, because they say that there's a person can live with the idea that an android lives forever, but they can't live with the idea that a human being has complete immortality. It's a really, really deep movie, and it's just like it's entrenched with so many things about like social conformity and love and artificial intelligence and our natural prejudices against people that aren't like us, and it touches on all that stuff. It's super, super dense. It was tanked. Everybody hated it. Critics hated it. My parents hated it. I had to watch it once, and of course, just being a kid, like there was a lot of stuff I didn't realize about it, but I've gone back to maybe like 2-3 times, whatever. It's still, if you look on like Rotten Tomatoes and stuff like that, nobody likes this film for whatever reason. Like it doesn't resonate with them at all. But for me, it's just like this perfect film that touches on all these issues that nothing else ever has in science fiction before. So it's kind of weird, like going to this from your Pittsburgh Pythons or whatever the movie was.
The fish that saved Pittsburgh.
The fish that saved Pittsburgh. But yeah, this is one of those movies for me that really it just flies under the general consciousness of science fiction. So that's my number 2.
There you go. That's a good one. Okay, my number 2 is Continental Divide from 1981. Anyone that knows me really well will tell you one of my favorite actors of all time was John Belushi. I think the work he did on SNL was some of the best ever in regard to that show. We talked about that back on episode 3 of the podcast. And really, he only had major roles in just 7 feature films, but I don't think he was ever better than he was in Continental Divide. And if you look at the last 2 films of his career, he played both against type, and mainstream audiences just didn't go for it. And you got to think about it. After his movie debut in Animal House in '78, people expected him, to see him every time as the slob Bluto in every role that he did. And he wasn't about that, right? He wanted to try different things. He was an actor, for crying out loud. And, seeing him as the male lead in a romantic comedy was just not something audiences expected from him, nor did they want to see him in that. And it's too bad, because if Continental Divide had been his first film, I think he would have been set up for a long career as a leading man. I mean, it would have been cut short, by his death. I mean, this movie came out in September of 81, and he died 6 months later in March of 82. But like, from a perception point of view, I think audiences would have accepted him more as a leading man if this had been his first movie. Because if you only know him as Bluto or Jake Blues, I would strongly suggest that you might want to go back and take a look at this movie and see what he does here, because his performance is very, very good. He's vulnerable. He plays this guy that's like lovelorn, but he's also really funny, and he's got a lot to work with. As far as the script is concerned. Lawrence Kasdan wrote the script, and at the time he was getting established as a screenwriter in Hollywood. He worked on The Empire Strikes Back, but he had this script for a romantic comedy that he wrote, and he showed it to Steven Spielberg. Spielberg loved the script, so Spielberg even acted as executive producer on the film. And I'm telling you, if you watch the movie, it's actually really good. And so in it, Belushi's like this crack journalist for the Chicago Sun-Times, and he's going after this like corrupt city councilor, Jablonowitz, and then he gets into hot water, so he's got to get out of town for a while. So his editor decides he's going to assign him to a story about this reclusive woman in the Rocky Mountains, and she does research on endangered bald eagles. So he goes out there. They obviously have nothing in common. He loves the city. He likes smoking and drinking. And she likes being secluded from people and like fresh air and mountains. And of course, they fall in love. And I'll tell you what, I'm usually not a big fan of romantic comedies. I usually only watch them with my wife, so
I'm not either. Yeah.
I watch it with her. So in return, maybe she'll watch the movies I want to watch, but I've always really, really enjoyed this movie. To me, it's a throwback to the Hepburn and Tracy films of like the 40s and 50s. It just didn't connect with audiences. Like I say, they wanted to see Belushi at a toga party instead of in a love scene. And it's too bad, because as far as movie bombs go, it is one of my all-time favorites.
I was looking up on Netflix just now, and there isn't a single part of his catalog, of Belushi's catalog, on Netflix.
No,
nothing.
I know.
Nothing. I know earlier when you mentioned
not even the best of Belushi on SNL, I don't think, is it?
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
I mean, You mentioned earlier, you were talking about James Brown. I was going to cut in that I watched Delirious the other night. It's on Netflix.
Oh, good for you.
And he does like the best James Brown impersonation. I mean, Eddie Murphy is just...
You've got to find, I think it's on YouTube somewhere, the James Brown hot tub party sketch that he does on SNL, Eddie Murphy. It's amazing. Because he's in costume and he's jumping in and out of the hot tub and he's yelling at the band and stuff like that. You got to see it.
Yeah, this is obviously like a huge digression from what we're supposed to be talking about, but I don't think people realize just like, man, Eddie Murphy did some of the best impressions I've ever heard.
Ever. Yeah.
Like him doing Michael Jackson, like he can actually really sing and he sounds just like Michael Jackson. Like it's
Stevie Wonder, everybody. Yep, it was great. Yeah. Okay, anyways, your number one box office bomb of all time that's your favorite? Go.
My number one box office bomb. I like movies. I mentioned this earlier. I like movies where there are multiple, like there's all kinds of stars in the movie, even if they're just doing cameos, but like there's just like this hodgepodge of like a bunch of actors and actresses that, you know, a lot of them you know really well. Some of them you know their face, but you can't remember what, you know, exactly what movie they were in, but just like throw like the kitchen sink at them, you know, like tons and tons of actors be in this movie. So this movie came out in 1996. I will give you some of the names that were in this movie and I want you to tell me what it is. Okay,
sure.
It had Natalie Portman. It had Tom Jones. It had Michael J. Fox, Sarah Jessica Parker, Martin Short. It had Danny DeVito. It had Pierce Brosnan. It had Glenn Close, and it had Jack Nicholson playing two separate roles, including the President of the United States. What's the movie?
Oh, Mars Attacks?
It's Mars Attacks.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yes. Okay, Mars Attacks is another one of those weird movies. Like I said, I like movies with a ton of actors and actresses that you wouldn't expect to be together. I love that, right? I love movies that as soon as you start watching it, you can immediately recognize that it is bad, right? Even if you like it, you can acknowledge and you can see that, hey, you know what? The general public is not going to like this. I love that stuff. And I love movies that while you're watching it, you're constantly questioning why it was being made. Mars Attacks is one of those movies for me. Obviously, it was based on the trading card series game, which I actually didn't know before I was doing the research, but I guess there was some sort of trading card series of the same name that they made this adaptation for this movie. It has all kinds of it's basically like a parody of science fiction. It's an intentionally a B movie, one of those like intentionally bad movies. It has black comedy. It has political satire. As I alluded to earlier, Jack Nicholson playing dual roles. He's the president of the United States, James Dale, and he's also a land developer in Las Vegas. Glenn Close is the first lady, and I think her part is just amazing in it. The aliens obviously are just out of this world. I don't, no pun intended, but I don't know how to explain like how weird and like poorly made the aliens were, but it actually like strangely works for this. The Martians were actually created by a really, really famous and influential company, a development company. I don't know if you've ever heard of Industrial Light and Magic, Chris, have you?
Yep.
Yes, of course. Obviously you have.
Yep. Lucas started it for Star Wars.
Yeah, that was a slow pitch that I threw to you and you knocked it out. That's right.
Yeah, thanks for robbing me that.
Yeah, it's just it's one of those really weird movies where it does not hold up. It does not stand the test of time. It's not going to be on anybody's list of their favorite movies. It cost $70 million to make. They spent nearly $30 million to market it, and its gross was $101 million. So they basically profited about $1 million making this film, which I just think is insane. It's insane, especially considering all the star power that they had behind it, just how much money they spent in promoting the film and stuff like that. It never took off. Like I said, I mentioned this before, it's one of the few Tim Burton films that I actually like, this along with like Edward Scissorhands and maybe one or two others. But it is just a weird movie. The critics hated it then, the critics hate it now. And if you ask most people, this is a movie that they've completely wiped clean from their memory. They're not going to think about it if it ever came out. They're not going to buy the DVD. They're not going to watch it on Netflix. It's one of those bad movies that I will always love. So Mars Attacks is my number one. Nice.
At least it made money. Mine lost big time money on this one.
$1 billion though? Do you really count that as...
Well, this movie that I'm about to tell you about cost $51 million to make and made 14. So It is one of the biggest box office bombs of all time.
I think I know what it is.
But it's also the best, at least in my opinion, and that's Ishtar.
Oh, that's what I was thinking.
It came out in May of 1987, but before anyone ever even saw the movie, it already had this like massive negative publicity. It went way over budget, like I said, $51 million. There was like all these stories of like arguments and fighting on the set. Dustin Hoffman, he was already really, really well established as probably the hardest actor to work with in Hollywood at the time. And okay, let's take him and let's put him together with Warren Beatty, who's probably, I would say his popularity at the time was probably only overmatched by his massive ego, right? So, okay, let's put them both together and match them up with first-time director Elaine May. And then, better yet, let's send them off to Morocco and have them shoot a comedy in the desert. What could possibly go wrong, right? Well, everything. So
a comedy in the desert.
Yep. I think one of the biggest problems was that, audiences, they heard all about this huge comedy, that was going to be coming out. They're making this huge comedy starring two of the biggest box office actors, of all time in this movie. It costs a fortune to make. So audiences were expecting the greatest movie ever made. And instead they got Ishtar. And I think really, if you sort of strip away the bad press, all the fighting and all the issues with the budget and, the production disaster, I think you're actually left with a pretty damn good little movie. The problem is, like I say, why the hell did it cost $51 million to make it? Mm-hmm. I was a big fan of Ishtar when I first saw it back in 87. Everyone that I knew thought I was nuts. A lot of people still do. But I tell you what, if you're looking for a quirky, fun movie, Ishtar is really enjoyable. The problem is, when you look at it, why did they cast those two actors in the film? Like, they both play against type. Although I guess you could say that's kind of a tough claim for Hoffman, right? Because, he's a real versatile actor, but it could have been made with any two actors, playing the leads. But anyway, as a movie, so it's about these two singer-songwriters. They're in New York, and they're both, like, horrible at singing and songwriting. And you know what? Think about it now. Actually, the movie might have played a lot better, decades later when, the public reveled in like bad auditions at American Idol. You know what I mean? But anyway, these guys, they can't sing. Their songs are horrible. So they join together. They form this singer-songwriter team, like kind of like Simon and Garfunkel, but like just no talent. And, the scenes where they're singing the songs and writing the songs are just hilarious. And so these guys can't get any gigs. So they get this agent who gets them a gig, singing at a hotel in Morocco. So they go there, and of course they get caught up in all this like political intrigue in the Middle East. They meet this woman, she's got a secret map, and then there's like these insurgent guerrillas. Charles Grodin is in it. He's like a CIA officer. There's like a gunfire with, these missile launchers and everything, and it's just crazy. And at the end, like, the CIA wants the map, so they agree to set up this huge concert for them where they can play their horrible songs at. And it's just a total mess, but I love every second of that movie. Every time I watch it, ask my old college roommates, because I used to make them watch it over and over again with me. I was like the worst roommate ever, I tell you. But anyway, I love Ishtar, and I'm not ashamed to say it. So those are our like box office bombs that we love. We're getting up against the clock, so let's have a little bit of
fun with Yancey.
Okay, so I'll tell you what I can do real quickly. I'm just going to throw some questions at you, Yancey, about some of the biggest box office bombs of all time. Okay.
Yes.
So this 1995 Kevin Costner movie went over budget during production and gained such negative press, it was actually nicknamed Fishtar. Can you name it?
I can. I was actually going to give this an honorable mention as one of my favorite bombs because I think it's a cool movie. It was just really poorly executed, and the expectation was really high. It's a Waterworld, but I'd never heard that fish tar analogy. That's amazing.
Yeah, so there you go. Okay, so this 2013 Johnny Depp bomb was a remake of a 1981 bomb. It was a Western. It's centered on a former Texas Ranger who dons a mask in order to fight outlaws in the Wild West alongside his Native American sidekick. Can you name the film?
It's Johnny Depp is the Native American.
Yes, Tonto.
It's, oh my God, what is it? It's not, no, that's Chuck Norris. It's not Texas Ranger, it's Lone Ranger. The
Lone Ranger. There you go. You got it in. Just beat the buzzer. Good for you. Okay, so we mentioned Eddie Murphy. And I'll tell you what, during the 80s, he was the king of Hollywood. Like movies like Trading Places, Beverly Hills Cop, Coming to America. They made him
Coming to America is awesome.
Oh, it's awesome. It's those movies made him one of the biggest box office draws in the world, right? But after several years, sometimes Hollywood stars, they fade. And things sort of hit a new low for poor Eddie.
It happens.
In 2002, yep. He had this box office flop. And it was about him running a nightclub on the moon. And it was a science fiction comedy. Can you name the movie? One of the biggest bombs of all time.
I've actually watched this movie Oh, what was this?
It's named after a former planet in our solar system.
It's like...
It was a planet, then it was changed to a dwarf planet. I know you're an astronomy kind of guy.
I know it's Pluto, but like it's like a long name. It's like 5 or 6 words in the title.
The Adventures of Pluto Nash.
That's what it is.
Okay. All right, I got one for you here. This is based on a comic book character from the 70s and 80s. And this comic book character was originally sort of conceived as using themes of like existentialism and like social parody. And the movie rights were optioned by George Lucas, of all people. And a live action film was released in 1986. It consisted of a little person in a bird suit playing the lead character. Now, the producers, obviously, they wanted to change the direction of the film from that social satire to more of a family-friendly movie. So, yeah.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, so of course, in order to do that, they have this lead character almost having sex with Marty McFly's mom, Leah Thompson.
Oh, my.
But anyway, needless to say, the movie bombed, and it's widely considered to be one of the worst movies ever made. Can you name the movie?
Is it Howard the Duck?
Oh, congratulations. Very, very good. Yes,
I've never actually watched that movie, but I do know like how it's linked to just being complete dog. I've heard this before.
Yeah, I actually kind of liked it, but that's me. I just love bomb movies. Okay, so Will Smith, you mentioned him, you mentioned the movie, so I was going to, mention about the bomb movie that he made in 1999. Obviously, it's Wild Wild West. So instead, can you sing some of the lyrics from his song?
I know it's there's one part he says, Will West, Taming the West, I remember the name.
Any damsel that's in distress, be out of that dress when she meet Jim West. Come on.
Oh my God.
Swallow your pride, let your lip react. You don't want to see my hand where my hip be at. Remember that?
We're going straight to the wild.
Understand me, son. I'm the slick as it is. I'm the quick as it is. Did I say it was the slick as it is?
Oh my.
This is really bad. This is
just
bad
awful.
radio.
Let's just end this right now and we'll just go out because it's bombing, so that's the thing, right? It's a bomb show.
Yeah.
There you go. So it's perfect. Anyway, it's at C. McBrien or at Yancey Eaton on Twitter. You always shoot us an email. Chris at popgoesyourworld.com or Yancey at popgoesyourworld.com. Thank you for listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop cultural podcast for the generations.
Thank you for listening to the Pop Goes Your World podcast. Continue the conversation on Twitter at C. McBrien or at Yancey Eaton. Please consider leaving a review for the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.